Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart.
Tonight, what began as a series of fetish break-ins with the theft of undergarments and sex toys quickly escalated to assault and murder.
It's just really frightening. Like, this stuff is what you see on TV.
Fears that the burglars' actions would escalate came true. 2 women were sexually assaulted.
Police were called to this home in Brighton after the boyfriend of Marie-France Como made a horrific discovery. He found his girlfriend's body.
Less than 2 months after Corporal Marie-France Como was raped and killed, 27-year-old Jessica Lloyd was reported missing.
We walked around the house and started walking the perimeters. We saw tire tracks first and then saw the footprints.
The officers actually hadn't even completely set up for the roadside check when one of the members of the Belleville Police Service identified that there was a vehicle that could match the tire treads.
Investigators were shocked when they suspected the person responsible was a well-respected leader and member of the community, someone hiding in plain sight.
They realized he was residing in Tweed, where the 2 sexual assaults had occurred in September, and that he was also obviously the base commander of CFB Trenton, where our first homicide victim was based.
You don't get to be that position with being a stupid man. I think that was just arrogance. I think that was, they're not going to catch me. They don't know who I am.
He is one of the worst offenders in Canadian history.
Here now is Morganne Campbell with part 2 of A Monster in Uniform.
It was February 4th, 2010. Investigators working a missing persons case decided to set up a roadside ride program just outside the home where Jessica Lloyd lived. They had been searching for her for just over a week. But that ride program wouldn't be aimed at nabbing impaired drivers. They were instead examining tires and vehicles.
He was, I think, the 3rd car to drive through that night. We've always talked about, it's one more person standing in front of you at the Tim Hortons when you're going to get your coffee to go stand on the side of the road. That's how close he was in time.
The roadside block wasn't even fully set up when both Belleville and provincial police spotted a vehicle matching what they were looking for.
If they had taken a few more minutes to set that up, they wouldn't have come across him that night.
Driving a Nissan Pathfinder was the highest-ranking officer of CFB Trenton, Canada's largest military airbase, located not far from the roadside stop. It just so happened the commander owned a cottage in Tweed, right beside Larry Jones.
And I thought it was pretty cool having this big officer next door to me. I said, God, that's kind of nice. And you see the other helicopters fly over and give him away. I admired the guy at first because the position he held, and he flew the Queen and Prime Minister all over the world. I thought that's really nice having a guy like that next door.
Russell Williams lived in the bungalow during the week, and on weekends, his wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman, would join him. The couple also owned a home in Ottawa where Harriman lived and worked.
We did invite him over to some parties that we had, and I think the only ones he came to was our Christmas parties a few times. Other than that, we didn't see him very often. And then to make him even feel more at home, we included him in our golf tournaments we had. We had charity golf tournaments, he and his wife, and I thought they had a great time. And then they come back to the house after the tournament. We had a couple of drinks. Like, he called her Mary Elizabeth. Like, if you were my wife, I'd say, "Hon, would you like a drink?" I say, "Hon," I wouldn't call her Mary Elizabeth. It's a very formal relationship. And I thought it was kind of strange.
But was Russell Williams living a double life?
As they started to look into his history, they realized he was residing in Tweed, where the 2 sexual assaults had occurred in September, and that he was also obviously the base commander of CFB Trenton, where our first homicide victim, Marie-France Como, was based. And then obviously he commutes from the base to Tweed, driving past Jessica Lloyd's house.
Which is why Williams quickly rose to the top of the suspect list in February of 2010. When Jessica disappeared, Belleville Police and the Ontario Provincial Police began working together. And once those forces realized Williams was from Ottawa, they started to connect the dots there. After a rash of fetish burglaries, no longer were the three police forces working in silos. On February 7th, 3 days after Williams drove through the police checkpoints, he was brought in for questioning at a police station in Ottawa.
He had no choice. When that phone rang, he was at in their house in Ottawa, and they said, "Russ, we want you to come on down." He had no choice whatsoever. All you can do, if you say, "Well, I don't know, I'll think about it." No, you have to go down and say, "Yes, gentlemen, how can I help you?"
You ever been interviewed by the police in a room like this before?
I have never been interviewed like this.
Oh, no? Okay.
No. I guess the closest interview by NIS for top secret clearance.
I have to admit, I was a little bit cynical when they first told me who they were investigating. Obviously, his position, all the things about his reputation made it difficult to believe he could be responsible for these things. All right. Well, again, Russell, I appreciate you coming in. An investigation like this, I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate it's been big news, especially down Belleville way. And, you know, obviously our approach to cases like this is that we don't give up on somebody being alive until we get evidence that they're not. So because of that, we're treating Jessica's case as an emergent situation, obviously. Yeah. So we're fast forwarding things that we might normally take our time with, and that's why we're here on a Sunday afternoon. He appeared very relaxed. I'm sure he wasn't, but he wanted to appear that way. He wanted to appear as somebody who was there to help the police find a missing woman. The last thing we want is to be calling people back again and again and again.
What confident people can sometimes do is sort of brazen their way through by answering some of the questions and not the others, and being a bit vague. There's an art to sort of not telling the truth, and he went in there. I think he was confident that he could talk his way out of it.
Do you remember what time you left the base that night?
What would unfold in this room on Super Bowl Sunday 2010 was a cat and mouse game between a seasoned officer and a powerful colonel.
What would you be willing to give me today to help me move past you in this investigation?
What do you need?
Well, would you be willing to supply things like fingerprints, blood samples,
Sure.
things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Footwear impressions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think it's fair to say when I walked in the interview with him, I was probably 50-50 on whether he was actually the person responsible or not.
Coming up, a police interrogator plays the slow game and keeps the colonel talking. But ultimately, it wouldn't come down to what the base commander wanted to protect, but who. Welcome back. A high-ranking military official is questioned by police in connection to the disappearance of a 27-year-old woman. Will evidence of distinctive tire treads and footprints left at the scene lead to a confession? We now return to Morganne Campbell with a monster in uniform.
Williams has been described by many as a model military officer with over 2 decades of experience, an elite pilot, instructor, and leader. The career military man glided through the ranks, landing himself top secret military missions that supported Canadian Forces operations in Afghanistan.
He's an intellect. He has a very sharp and keen ability to get to the heart of a matter. I found him to be compassionate.
Obviously, that's going to develop.
He was a public speaker, often touting the importance of supporting the Canadian Armed Forces, or CAF.
The wing, obviously, is a community unto itself, but it can't be very successful without being closely connected to the communities that surround it.
Williams had flown top dignitaries, including prime ministers and even the late Queen of England, and rubbed shoulders with the former Minister of Defense, Peter MacKay.
As far as I know, and from what I've seen in the past from his file, it was just a shining bright star. And if you talk to people on the wing, they will probably tell you that they admired when Commander, he was involved in everything in the community here.
My son worked with him, and he knew of him, and he looked up to him.
Do you have your own lawyer?
I have a realty lawyer, but
okay.
No, I don't have a lawyer.
Russell Williams, I think, was a fairly practical person, an intelligent person, so the conversation I had with him was fairly straightforward. He tended to agree with me on most things that I said to him. He was given his rights to counsel and cautioned and told he could leave at any time, and he was aware of all that and decided to continue with the conversations.
But the problem is, Russell, is every time I walk out of this room, there's another issue that comes up, okay? And it's not issues that point away from you, it's issues that point at you, okay? And I want you to see what I mean, all right? This is the footwear impression of the person who approached the rear of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January, okay? This is a photocopy of the boot that you took off your foot just a little while ago. You take a look at this print. These are identical. Okay. Your vehicle drove up the side of Jessica Lloyd's house. Your boots walked to the back of Jessica Lloyd's house on the evening of the 28th and 29th of January. Okay. You want discretion. We need to have some honesty, okay? Because this is getting out of control really fast, Russell. Really, really fast. When we matched the footwear to the footwear in the snow outside Jessica's house, that was pretty conclusive, and certainly his reaction when I put that piece of evidence to him was very telling. He had spoken for several hours up until that point, and all of a sudden he was practically speechless. Like this. And from that point on, it was just a matter of giving him the space to come to terms with the fact that he'd been caught and finding a way for him to tell us what he'd done.
Williams was not only under investigation for murder, 2 sexual assaults, and the disappearance of Jessica Lloyd, but he was also suspected of committing more than 80 lingerie break-ins.
Are you familiar with how DNA works?
I think broadly, yes, I would guess so.
When Russell Williams was questioned by investigators, he arrived at the station in the same vehicle officers stopped him in just days earlier.
This is getting beyond my control. All right, I came in here a few hours ago, and I called you the way I called you today because I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt. But you and I both know you were at Jessica Lloyd's house. And I need to know why.
Well, I don't know what to say. It's,
Well, you need to explain it, because this is the other problem we're having, Russell, okay? Again, these decisions are made by me. Right now, there's a search warrant being executed at your residence in Ottawa. Okay? So your wife now knows what's going on. There's a search warrant being executed at your residence in Tweed, and your vehicle's been seized. Okay? You and I both know they're going to find evidence that links you to these situations. You and I both know that the unknown offender, male DNA, on Marie France Comeau's body is going to be matched to you, quite possibly before the evening's over. Okay?
Coming up, what is revealed during a 13-hour-long interview is unlike any other investigation in Canadian history. Welcome back to Crime Beat. Police now have a suspect under interrogation. But questions remain as to the whereabouts of Jessica Lloyd and if she's actually alive. Here's Morganne Campbell with A Monster in Uniform.
At this point in the interrogation, Russell Williams has been told police were searching his home in Ottawa, where his wife is, their cottage in Tweed, and his office at the base.
So you talk about perception. My only two immediate concerns from a perception perspective are what my wife must be going through right now.
Yeah.
And the impact this is going to have on the Canadian Forces.
The detective sergeant has discovered the base commander's Achilles heel, his concern for his wife.
I'm struggling with how upset my wife is right now.
Russ, what are you looking for?
I'm concerned that they're tearing apart my wife's brand new house.
So am I. But if nobody tells them what's there and what's not, they don't have any choice.
By the time he was talking about being concerned about his wife and the military, it was certainly clear to us that he was responsible. We already had compared his footwear to the footwear impressions found outside of Jessica Lloyd's house. It was just a matter of trying to find a way for him to admit that he was responsible.
I want to minimize the impact on my wife.
So do I.
So how do we do that?
Well, we start by telling the truth.
After that, it didn't take long for Williams to open up about what happened to Jessica Lloyd and where she was.
Is she close to where she lives? I've got maps of that general area. Which town is she near? Why don't we start there?
I'm not sure if you give me a map of that covers Calagard down to the highway and over to Tweed and south, I'll show you.
And that's his first real admission that he's responsible. So I'm trying to be as careful as I can to have him continue to explain things to me and not interrupt the flow of his conversation. I think I certainly held out a little bit of hope that he was going to tell me that perhaps Jessica is alive somewhere.
How long has she been there for?
A little over a week.
Was it fairly quick from the time she left?
Friday night.
Friday night?
Yeah.
So where was she between Thursday night and Friday night?
In Tweed.
With you?
Yeah.
How long was she alive for?
Almost 24 hours, not quite.
Okay. Russ? You're doing the right thing here.
And once he turned that corner, he wouldn't stop talking. Wow. He knew, and he knew he was going to get life imprisonment, and he knew he'd never walk the streets again, you know. But I think he had a need to unburden himself.
What do you want to know?
Well, do you want to work forwards or backwards?
Doesn't matter.
So when we find her, is she going to have those clothes on too?
Yeah.
Williams took police to Jessica's lifeless body, discovered wrapped in a blanket and bound with electrical tape. For just over a week, Lloyd's body was left in a shallow grave on Carey Road near Tweed.
He gave us precise location, right down to the odometer reading from the coroner. He had measured that. We knew that the interview was going to conclude, and we knew we had people there.
But even that is so calculated. I mean, to have measurements, a location?
Yep, yeah. He seemed to record everything. Very precise in his recording. You know, the kind of guy who, if he bought a coffee, he would write it in his date book with how much the coffee was.
It was Super Bowl Sunday at halftime, actually, when Chris Nicholas and the chief of Belleville Police came over to my aunt's place and told us that they had arrested somebody and that she was gone. At the time, it was obviously very devastating. After 11 days, I mean, I didn't have a good feeling in my stomach anyways. You know, as negative as it is, it was a little bit of closure, or it was a little bit of where do we go from here? Like, at least there's an answer, right? At least there's not all the what ifs, what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. Unfortunately, it's the worst way it could have ended, but it's the beginning to an end.
Several women and children lined the street outside the funeral home holding banners and candles. Jessica Lloyd, they say, is a hero.
Yes, Jessica lost her life, and you know what? It can never come back. And you know, we feel for her family, but we need her family to know that Jessica died a hero.
Her face, posted across the country, had thousands hoping for Jessica Lloyd's safe return. But today, they are hearing of her death.
I know that this community has been placed on heightened state of caution for several weeks, and we are pleased that the public safety has been served in this case.
The 27-year-old's body was found this morning in Tweed. Added to the shock, the man arrested is someone with a top level of authority in our military.
I remember they said the name and then said what he was. And it took me a second, and I looked at my cousin, I said, does that mean that's the guy that runs the base? And he said, I think so. And then I went, oh no. And I think it was 10 seconds, my phone started ringing and ringing.
Been a very, very successful military career, and suddenly it's all gone in a second. You thought you knew this person, and you had no idea who he really was.
The Belleville Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police began reviewing other serious incidents in the vicinity of the city of Belleville. Due to the similarities in those incidents, the police investigative team linked the crimes to a single suspect.
Russell Williams, who was also the commander at the base where Marie-France Como worked, admitted to raping and murdering her as well. The pair had worked one flight together and didn't have a personal relationship.
She actually discovered me in the basement. She was trying to get her cat to come upstairs, and the cat was in the basement, had seen me and was fixated on me in the corner. So when she spotted me, I had the same flashlight. I subdued her. Tied her up, brought her upstairs. And strangled her.
It seemed Williams would become an open book, admitting to sexual assaults and dozens of home invasions targeting women.
Well, I suffocated her, I put tape on her.
There was a detective there assisting us that night from their homicide unit, but that detective had just recently transferred from their sexual assault unit. So when he was obviously in the process of confessing, she was aware of what he was saying. And when he told us where he lived, she had worked on the investigation into all the unsolved break-and enters that they were trying to solve, and he was right in the middle. So it was simply her, bringing that to our attention, that they'd had this spree of break-and enters, and then asking him the question, and he acknowledged it.
Williams is charged with the first-degree murder of Jessica Lloyd, the first-degree murder of Marie Como, and 2 other home invasions that occurred in September 2009.
But today, Ontario police detectives unveiled an alleged criminal side to the colonel, not only as an alleged multiple murderer, but also suspected of raping 2 other women.
The Prime Minister stands behind the armed forces, saying they're also Williams victims, especially those who worked with the commander.
Our thoughts go out to all the members of the Canadian Forces who knew the commander and who have been very badly wounded and betrayed by all of this.
This is what we're struggling with as individuals, because most of us knew this individual. And it's tough to reconcile what we know to what he did.
He's just an evil person that hid under that uniform.
Coming up after the break, the trial of Russell Williams gets underway. Welcome back to Crime Beat. A high-ranking military official is arrested and charged in 2 murders, 2 sex assaults, and numerous break-and-enters. The crime sprees have left a country feeling betrayed and in shock. Here's Morganne Campbell with a monster in uniform.
It was a media frenzy outside Belleville Superior Court of Justice Thursday morning. All eyes were on Colonel Russell Williams. Once a rising military star, the former base commander of CFB Trenton now faces murder, sexual assault, and break-and-enter charges.
When Williams entered the courtroom, his eyes were fixated on the ground until he made his way across to the prisoner's box. Once he was seated, the family of Jessica Lloyd entered the courtroom holding a framed photograph of Jessica. When they entered, Williams didn't look up once at the family.
It was something that my mom wanted to do, actually, just to kind of not so sensationalize it so it's all about him. There is victims in this case, and we're obviously upset about it.
Williams' lawyer, Michael Edelson, told the court that after reviewing thousands of documents disclosed by the Crown in numerous meetings, his client decided he would plead guilty to all 86 charges he faces.
Not relief the fact that he's pleading guilty, relief the fact that the court isn't going to take 2 years.
Williams' lawyer will put forth a guilty plea at an October 18th hearing. That appearance is expected to include the sentencing hearing.
An awful lot of work had been done after the arrest before the case was put before the courts. And having a guilty plea, knowing that the community wasn't going to be, I'm going to say, enduring a lengthy trial, nothing could undo what had been done. Nothing could change the impact it had on everyone, but not having it drag out for months and months and months, I think everybody sort of took a deep breath.
There was a time when Colonel Russell Williams was a respected Air Force commander at CFB Trenton, but today the convicted rapist and murderer was exposed. In court, a disturbing look at photos taken by Williams as he donned women's lingerie and underwear stolen from victims as young as 9 years old. In total, police seized thousands of pictures like these, some pornographic.
Over time, he took more and more risks, leaving a lurid letter behind at one home, breaking in while a woman showered in another. Since they weren't home at the time, most had no idea it ever happened, until Williams was arrested for the murder of Jessica Lloyd and confessed to it all.
In his own words, Williams provided chilling details of Jessica Lloyd's final hours in this interrogation video played in court.
Well, so I raped her in her house. And then I took her to the car and took her to Tweed. Spent the day in Tweed. And then I hit her as we were walking. She thought we were leaving. Hit her on the back of the head.
Okay. Well, what did the hit on the back of the head do?
Well, I was surprised that her skull gave way. She was there and immediately unconscious. And I strangled her.
Okay. What did you hit her with?
Flashlight.
I don't know what her thoughts would have been. For her sake, you'd like to think that she didn't think that it was the end for her.
Police also learned what happened to Marie Franscomo, who spotted Williams hiding behind the furnace in the basement of her home.
When she spotted me, I had the same flashlight. I subdued her, tied her up, brought her upstairs. And suffocated her. Some tape. Left her there.
Williams documented both murders on video. Tapes too graphic to play in court. First-hand accounts were presented for the official record.
Well, you're in an audience like that too. So, I mean, we're sitting up front row, dead center, right, you know. And every time there was something very graphic, you can feel about 40 sets of eyeballs turn and look at the back of you at the same time. I didn't want that many eyeballs on me at once. We just decided we didn't want to be there.
Williams sat silently with his head down as friends, family, and other observers were gasping and openly wept. They listened to the Crown speak of Williams meticulously covering windows before and cleaning up after, hearing Como cry and plead that she, quote, didn't deserve to die. Lloyd was seen to be very cooperative with Williams, so not to upset him, and was said to utter the words, quote, if I die, will you make sure my mom knows I love her?
Williams says he killed the two women because he was afraid they would tell police about the incidents and link him to the crimes.
When police searched Williams's Ottawa home, they found multiple computer boxes stored in the basement. Inside, women's clothing and lingerie. Police in Tweed found the same types of clothing carefully hidden in bags and boxes. In total, more than 1,400 pieces of underwear were squirreled away and cataloged.
Williams was asked by police interrogators if he wanted to write letters of apology to the victims' families. After about an hour, he'd come up with these letters here to Jessica Lloyd's family, the family of Marie-France Como, and his wife, Mary Elizabeth Harriman. In the letter to the Lloyd family, he wrote, I am sorry for having taken your daughter from you. He goes on to say, I know she loved you very much. She told me again and again. He writes this to Como's father, I am sorry for having taken your daughter Marie-France from you. And this to his wife, he writes, I love you. I am so sorry for having hurt you like this.
From top military man to perverted monster, now another transformation.
Oh no? Okay.
From cold, remorseless killer in this interrogation video to cowering, sobbing convict. His voice quivering, he told the court, I've committed despicable crimes, Your Honor. I shall spend the rest of my life regretting above all that I have ended two vibrant, innocent, and cherished lives.
After hearing nearly a week of evidence, it took Justice Robert F. Scott less than an hour to hand down 2 life sentences. Williams, a decorated former commander of CFB Trenton, was also sentenced to 10 years for each of the sexual assaults and 2 charges of forcible confinement. He was also handed 1 year for each of the 82 fetish break-ins he committed. The sentences to be served concurrently.
He is one of the worst offenders in Canadian history. We can all think of a handful of names, and everybody knows those names, and he's now on that list.
From our perspective as defense lawyers, what this case demonstrated was that the justice system could deal with even the most horrific of crimes in a dignified and respectful way.
Crown prosecutors revealed during the trial that Williams took steps to ensure his wife would never discover his criminal side. She has never spoken publicly about Williams or his crimes. Former Globe and Mail reporter and author Timothy Appleby says he uncovered new information about the disgraced ex-colonel while writing his book.
One of my sources told me about the child pornography. It involved adolescent girls, in provocative or sexual. It was very illegal.
Appleby says Williams refused to enter a guilty plea if police brought child pornography charges forward, which would have led to a drawn-out court process that may have spanned months.
He told them, then there will be no deal. I will not plead guilty. We will go to trial if you lay those charges. And that, I think, speaks volumes about the kind of man that Williams was, because he was deeply ashamed. Murder is one thing, children is another.
We reached out to police, the Crown, and Williams's lawyer, and no one would confirm Appleby's claim that Williams was in possession of child pornography.
And
develop strong relations with the community.
At the age of 44, Williams had no criminal record. He did have a highly successful career in the Canadian Armed Forces. But then something switched in him, leading him to become one of Canada's most heinous criminals.
After the break, avoiding a full trial, the families begin the healing process, and the Canadian Armed Forces cuts ties with the former base commander in an unprecedented way. Welcome back. As the trial for a decorated Canadian Air Force pilot concludes, victims, their families, communities, and the Canadian Armed Forces begin to heal, but not without lingering questions. Here's Morganne Campbell with the conclusion of a monster in uniform.
With the conviction confirmed by the court, the Canadian Forces are now able to take action, including the prompt release of Russell Williams from the Armed Forces, the termination and clawback of his pay from the date of arrest, the removal of his medals, and all other measures available to us.
I was informed through press conference one day at the trial that they had stripped him of his rank. And that was fantastic. And I understand they burned his uniform. They burned anything that he had his name on, anything that he'd worn, they confiscated and burned it.
They really took a blow with this. In the military, everything is top down and you salute upwards. And when your commanding officer has, committed the worst crime that there is, there's nothing worse than murder, a shock would be an understatement.
How did you get in?
Same way, side basement window.
Side basement window.
Were you surprised at how calculated everything was? He doesn't want his wife's house ruined. He wants to help you find where Jessica is. He wants to provide the evidence of the undergarments. He opens up and tells you that he has videotaped some of these crimes. Why does somebody who commits these types of crimes do that?
That's a hard question to answer. I think only he can answer that for sure. But I certainly think that he seemed to be very focused on getting this done as quickly as possible.
Is there lots of ropes in Tweed, or is this probably the only rope?
No, there are two lengths.
Once he decided to confess, and once he knew we were going to find the evidence in his house, his goal from that point forward, every time I spoke to him, every time we went back to talk to him again, was get on with your questions, I'll answer all your questions, and I want to get this done as quickly as possible.
You said you took pictures of her. Clothed, unclothed?
Both. Clothed initially and then unclothed.
And if Williams wasn't caught, would he have killed again? Something police have wondered.
If for whatever reason you didn't end up on our radar, so to speak, do you think it would have happened again?
I was hoping not. I can't answer the question.
After the conviction, those impacted by the crimes of the man who once was a leader within the community rallied together in solidarity.
The day after the case against Williams wrapped, dozens descended on the city's market square to support families of the victims and to support each other. Tears flowed openly as people said goodbye, vowing to never forget.
It's about two beautiful, innocent young women, Jessica and Marie-France, who were so full of life, who have been taken from us.
Justice has been done, and now we must move on.
We wish to God we could have prevented it, but we couldn't, so now we can only learn from it, go forward, learn to trust again, love again.
You have to look for some positives sometimes in the darkest days. And there are always positives to look for, and how the community pulled together, how the members of the service worked lengthy hours, worked together with all of the agencies, that those were all positives. And the support for the family, the support for the military. That's how you move forward, is you look for humanity and you look for the way that citizens, officers, civilians, everybody is providing service to others.
As for Marie France Como, her family has chosen to grieve behind closed doors. A memorial was held for Como at the National Air Force Museum in November of 2010. Marie France Como was laid to rest at the National Military Cemetery in Ottawa. The cottage where Jessica Lloyd was tortured and killed still stands on Cozy Cove.
There's not a day goes by, you look at that house and you know that's where Russell Williams lived and he killed that young girl in that house there. Not a day goes by, you think about it every day. And same as what happened to me and my family, you feel pretty helpless. Like I tell you, gee, if I had any inkling that something was going on there, I'd have been there for Jessica. It's just devastating to know that you couldn't do nothing. You're just right next door and you didn't have a clue what was going on. They said, oh, time heals all wounds. No, I'll never, ever live this down. This is ridiculous. So it's something that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life.
This is hard for you to talk about. I can see it on your face.
Yeah. It hurts. Yeah. Anyway, we try to do the best we can and live our life as we want and try not to think about it.
A small memorial to Jessica Lloyd is tucked away on Carey Road, where her lifeless body was left by Williams, wrapped in a blanket.
Andy, it's been 12 years. Does it ever get easier for you and your family?
I don't know if it gets easier. Every year it gets a little less sad. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthdays and, you know, family reunions, things like that. I mean, you wish she was there.
Corey, during this interview, I've noticed that you have not referred to Williams by name. You have called him the offender. Why?
I don't feel that he deserves the recognition. I don't feel that he deserves to be remembered. Jessica and Mary are the ones who deserve to be remembered. All the memories that their families have, that the community have, they were the ones that were taken from us. And all of the other victims whose lives have been impacted for themselves, it may have impacted their loved ones as well. Those are the individuals that deserve to be remembered.
As for Andy Lloyd, there are many ways he remembers his sister, but he feels closest to her while behind the wheel of her old car, a Grand Prix he has kept in pristine shape since her death.
We had that relationship where she would tease me about owning the faster car, and I think she'd think it was pretty funny that I sold mine and kept hers, and now I have her car. I think she'd think that was pretty neat. I think everybody that knew her remembers her smile, remembers the fact that she was very funny and very witty and very outgoing. Great with kids, great with dogs. She was just good with everyone. Always had a smile for anybody, didn't matter who you were. So many people loved her and so many people were upset in what happened that everybody kind of pooled together and we end up catching the guy that was responsible before maybe something bad would have happened to someone else. So I think that's a bit of a legacy, and some people I know have kind of looked at her like a bit of a hero.
Russell Williams declined to be interviewed for this episode. He and his wife are now divorced. Mary Elizabeth Harriman has never spoken publicly of her ex-husband. Russell Williams is currently serving his life sentence at a maximum security institution in Quebec. He'll be 72 before he is eligible to apply for parole. From a keen-eyed police officer at a roadside stop to a dedicated brother trying to find out what happened to his sister, this case highlighted unwavering support for one another, and it showed the strength in overcoming the crimes of a monster in uniform. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app Visit globaltv.com or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.